There's a country in Northern Europe where murderers live in rooms with flat-screen televisions, ensuite bathrooms, and cooking classes, and somehow this is making the entire world rethink what justice actually means. That country is Norway. And by the end of this video, everything you thought you knew about how a country should be run will be completely turned upside down. Norway is a nation of just 5 million people, smaller than the population of New York City, that has quietly built one of the most extraordinary societies in human history. What Norway has achieved with 5 million people, extreme weather, and one lucky oil discovery will leave you genuinely speechless. Most people think of Norway and picture fjords, Vikings, and cold weather, and while all of that is completely true, it is approximately 1% of what makes Norway one of the most fascinating countries on Earth. The other 99% is what this video is about, and it starts right now. In 1969, Norway discovered oil beneath the North Sea. And what happened next separates Norway from virtually every other oil-producing country in human history. Instead of spending the money, Norway saved it, every single dollar, placing it into a sovereign wealth fund that has now grown to over $1.7 trillion, making it the largest sovereign wealth fund on Earth. Every single citizen of Norway is a theoretical millionaire through their share of this fund, which is invested in companies, real estate, and bonds across the entire global economy. Norway essentially owns small pieces of thousands of companies worldwide, meaning that when global businesses make money, Norway makes money quietly, continuously, without anyone really noticing. The Norwegian oil fund has a rule that Norway takes extremely seriously. The government can only spend a maximum of 3% of the fund's value per year. Norway decided that this money belonged not just to the people alive today, but to every future Norwegian generation that has not yet been born, which is either the most responsible or the most Norwegian thing any government has ever decided. Saudi Arabia found oil and built towers of glass and gold in the desert. Norway found oil and built a savings account for their grandchildren's grandchildren. This single decision about what to do with unexpected wealth reveals everything important about how Norway thinks about the relationship between a government and its people. Now let us talk about Norway's prison system, because this is the section that will make every viewer put down their phone, sit up straight, and question everything they have ever been told about crime and punishment. Norway's Halden prison is widely considered the most humane prison facility on Earth. And what happens inside it sounds less like incarceration and more like a university campus with locked gates. Prisoners in Norway's Halden prison have individual rooms with flat-screen televisions, comfortable furniture, and windows without bars. Norway decided that the purpose of prison was not to punish people into becoming better. It was to actually produce people who do not commit crime again. And they built their entire prison system around that single idea. Inside Norway's prisons, there are music studios, cooking facilities, jogging tracks, and workshops where inmates learn skilled trades. Norway pays prisoners a wage for the work they do inside prison, and that money can be saved, spent in the prison store, or sent to family members outside. The reoffending rate in Norway sits at approximately 20%, meaning 8 out of 10 people who leave a Norwegian prison do not return. The reoffending rate in the United States is approximately 70%, meaning 7 out of 10 people who leave an American prison come back. Norway is not soft on crime. Norway has simply found what actually works and built a system around it. Norway's most dangerous criminals, including those convicted of terrorism and mass murders, serve their sentences in these facilities, and Norway has been criticized internationally for what many consider excessive comfort. Norway's consistent response to this criticism is to point at the reoffending statistics and ask which system is actually achieving its stated goal. Norway has laws that will genuinely surprise you, and the first one will shock every dog owner watching this video. In Norway, it is illegal to neuter a dog without a specific medical reason certified by a veterinarian. Routine neutering, which is standard practice in most countries, including the United States, is a criminal offense in Norway. Norway considers the physical integrity of animals to be a legal right that humans do not have the authority to remove for convenience. When Norway decided that animals deserved legal protection of their bodily autonomy, most of the world was not paying attention. But the dogs of Norway certainly were. Norway controls all sales of alcohol above a certain strength through a government-owned store chain called Vinmonopolet, which translates simply as the wine monopoly. In Norway, you cannot buy wine or spirits in a supermarket. You must visit a specific government store with restricted operating hours that is completely closed on Sundays. Norway has some of the most expensive alcohol prices in the world, which means that a significant number of Norwegians regularly drive across the border into Sweden, specifically to buy cheaper wine and spirits. Norway has essentially created a situation where a cross-border road trip for discounted Coca-Cola and wine is a completely normal and widely practiced weekend activity. In Norway, it is illegal to advertise alcohol in any form. No billboards, no television commercials, no social media promotions, no sponsorships. Norway decided that alcohol advertising normalized drinking in ways that caused social harm and simply removed it entirely from public life, while continuing to allow alcohol to be sold through controlled channels. Norway has a law called allemannsretten, the right to roam, which gives every person the legal right to walk, camp, and travel across any uncultivated land in Norway, regardless of who privately owns it. Norway determined that the natural landscape of the country belongs to everyone who wants to experience it, and private land ownership does not include the right to exclude people from nature. Now let us talk about Norway's food, because Norwegian cuisine is one of the most misunderstood and most underestimated food cultures in the world. Norway's food tradition was built for survival in extreme conditions. Long, dark winters, remote coastlines, and temperatures that made food preservation a matter of life and death rather than culinary preference. Rakefisk is a traditional Norway delicacy that involves fermenting trout underground for several months before eating it, producing a smell so powerful that most non-Norwegians describe their first encounter with it as a physical event. Norway has been eating rakefisk since the 13th century, and the Norwegians who love it, and there are many, describe the flavor as extraordinary in a way that requires having survived the smell to fully appreciate. Brunost, brown cheese, is perhaps the most uniquely Norwegian food in existence, and Norway's relationship with brunost borders on the spiritual. Brunost is made by boiling whey until the milk sugars caramelize, producing a sweet, slightly salty, distinctly brown block that Norway puts on bread, waffles, crackers, and apparently everything else. In 2013, a truck carrying 27 tons of brunost caught fire inside a tunnel in Norway and burned continuously for 5 days. Norway's firefighters had never encountered anything like it. The high fat and sugar content of the cheese made it burn with an intensity that defied standard firefighting approaches, and Norway had to seal the tunnel and wait for the cheese to finish burning before they could enter. This is a completely real event that happened in Norway, and it is the most Norwegian story ever told. Norway's seafood tradition is one of the richest in the world, which makes complete geographical sense for a country with over 25,000 kilometers of coastline. Norway is one of the world's largest exporters of salmon, and the specific farming and processing techniques developed in Norway have shaped the global salmon industry so completely that Norway's methods are now the international standard. Fårikål, a simple slow-cooked stew of lamb and cabbage, is Norway's official national dish, chosen through a public vote. Norway's choice of national dish is humble, warming, and built for a cold autumn evening, which tells you something important about what Norway values. Not the most impressive or the most elaborate, but the most real and the most honest. Daily life in Norway operates according to values and principles that differ so significantly from most of the world that understanding them requires genuinely setting aside your existing assumptions. Norway's standard workweek is 37.5 hours. Overtime is genuinely unusual, and the minimum annual leave guaranteed by Norwegian law is 5 full weeks. Norway's productivity per worker hour is among the highest in the developed world, which directly challenges the assumption that longer working hours produce better results. Norway has essentially proven through decades of data that rested, trusted, and well-compensated workers produce more value per hour than exhausted and overworked ones, a finding that has spread less widely than you might expect. Parental leave in Norway is among the most generous on earth, with mothers receiving up to 49 weeks of fully paid leave after the birth of a child. Norway also provides fathers with their own separate guaranteed paternity leave that legally cannot be transferred to the mother. Norway decided that fathers being present for early childhood was important enough to make it a legal right rather than an optional benefit. Norway's parental leave system is paid at full salary through a combination of employer contributions and the national insurance system, meaning that a Norwegian family does not have to choose between financial survival and being present for a new child. Norway removed that impossible choice from the equation entirely, which is either extremely progressive or extremely obvious depending on how you look at it. The concept of janteloven shapes Norway's social culture in ways that outsiders find genuinely disorienting. Janteloven is the unwritten Scandinavian social principle that no individual should consider themselves more important, more talented, or more successful than the collective, and Norway takes this seriously in ways that manifest in daily behavior. In Norway, visibly displaying wealth is considered deeply uncomfortable and socially inappropriate, in a way that has no real equivalent in American culture. A Norwegian billionaire and a Norwegian bus driver will often wear the same brands, shop in the same stores, drive similar cars, and send their children to the same public schools, because Norway's social code makes conspicuous inequality genuinely embarrassing rather than aspirational. Norway has a cultural concept called friluftsliv, pronounced roughly as friluftsliv, which translates as open-air life, and is considered a fundamental Norwegian value rather than a hobby or a lifestyle choice. Norway believes that time spent outdoors in nature, regardless of weather or season, is essential to human psychological and physical well-being. There's a saying in Norway, there is no bad weather, only bad clothing, and Norwegians live by this with a commitment that visitors find either inspiring or exhausting depending on their own relationship with rain. Norway hikes in storms, skis in darkness, swims in freezing fjords in the depths of winter, and considers none of this remarkable or worthy of complaint. Norway's winter brings months of near-total darkness in the northern parts of the country, with some areas experiencing no sunlight at all for weeks at a time. Norway's response to the psychological challenge of this darkness is not to retreat indoors but to go outside more hiking, more skiing, more time in the cold air, which is either extremely wise or extremely Norwegian, and in this case those two things are the same. The concept of dugnad exists in Norway, as a community work tradition where neighbors gather voluntarily without payment to maintain shared spaces, clean common areas, or complete a community project together. Norway's dugnad tradition happens in apartment buildings, schools, sports clubs, and local neighborhoods across the country, not organized by government, not incentivized by money, simply done because Norway considers maintaining the shared community a personal responsibility of everyone who lives in it. Norway controls one of the most strategically significant pieces of Arctic territory on Earth, the Svalbard archipelago, a group of islands so far north that polar bears outnumber people. Norway's sovereignty over Svalbard is governed by a 1920 international treaty that allows citizens of any signatory country to live and work there without a visa, which has produced one of the most unusual geopolitical situations on Earth. Russia maintains an active settlement on Norway's Arctic territory called Barentsburg, where Russian citizens live, work, and operate under Norwegian law on Norwegian land. Norway and Russia have coexisted on this remote Arctic archipelago under the same century-old treaty through the Cold War, through the collapse of the Soviet Union, and through every period of tension between East and West that came after. Deep inside a mountain in Norway's Svalbard archipelago sits the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, a facility that stores seeds from every food crop on Earth as a backup against global catastrophe. Norway built the backup drive for human civilization inside an Arctic mountain and maintains it as a gift to the entire world, not just to Norway, which is either the most generous or the most quietly extraordinary thing any country has done in recent history. The Seed Vault in Norway currently holds over 1.3 million seed samples from almost every country on Earth. If a disease destroys a major crop, if a war devastates an agricultural region, if climate change makes a traditional growing area uninhabitable, the seeds stored in Norway's Arctic mountain provide the starting point for rebuilding. Norway is keeping the world's agricultural future safe inside a frozen mountain, mostly without anyone talking about it. Norway has over 80% of new car sales now being electric vehicles, making Norway the highest per capita electric vehicle market on Earth by an enormous margin. The transformation of Norway's car market happened within approximately 1 decade, driven entirely by smart financial incentives rather than restrictions or bans. Norway essentially proved that you can change an entire country's behavior faster than most people believe possible if you make the desired behavior cheaper and easier than the existing one. Norway's healthcare system provides universal coverage to every resident, funded through taxation, with no insurance premiums, no coverage limits, and no medical bankruptcies. Norway decided that the financial ruin of becoming sick was an unacceptable feature of a modern society and removed it from the equation through a system that Norwegian people across the political spectrum consistently support. University education in Norway is free, not subsidized, not income dependent, but completely free for both Norwegian citizens and international students at Norwegian public universities. Norway decided that the financial barrier to higher education produced worse outcomes for society than the cost of removing it, and has maintained free university education as a result. Now here is the section of this video that will stay with you longest, because Norway's existence raises a question that is genuinely uncomfortable for many people to sit with. Norway operates a capitalist economic system with private business, private property, free markets, and individual rights, the same basic economic framework as the United States. But Norway has made different choices about what to do with the wealth that system generates. Norway chose universal health care. Norway chose free universities. Norway chose humane prisons focused on rehabilitation. Norway chose generous parental leave. Norway chose a sovereign wealth fund that saves oil money for future generations. Norway chose to remove the financial terror of illness, bankruptcy, and old age from the daily calculations of its citizens. These are not accidents of geography or culture. They are choices that Norway made deliberately and has maintained consistently across different governments and different decades. Norway is not perfect, and Norway would be the first to acknowledge this. The cost of living in Norway is among the highest in the world, making daily life genuinely expensive in ways that create their own pressures and inequalities. Norway's extraordinary wealth is built on fossil fuel revenues from an oil fund that Norway is simultaneously trying to distance itself from as the world urgently addresses climate change. And yet Norway has built something worth examining honestly. A prison system that produces people who do not return. A work culture that produces more per hour by demanding less per day. A savings fund that protects people not yet born. A landscape that legally belongs to everyone. A seed vault that protects the entire world's food future inside an Arctic mountain. Norway found oil in 1969 and had to decide what kind of country it wanted to be. The decision Norway made to save the money, to invest in its people, to treat the landscape as a collective inheritance, to build prisons that rehabilitate, to remove the financial terror of illness and education, has produced results that the rest of the world is only beginning to study seriously. Norway is a country of 5 million people that has quietly and without much fanfare been running one of the most interesting experiments in how human beings can organize themselves together. The results are imperfect, complex, genuinely debatable, and absolutely worth every minute of your attention. Subscribe to Untold Facts, because the world is full of countries doing extraordinary things in near total silence. Norway has been one of them for decades. And now, finally, you know it.